a surprising number of Canadians want to be Americans, want to move to or live in the United States. As a matter of fact, in 2022, a record number of Canadian-born citizens moved to the USA and changed their residence. But I'm not one of them, no means whatsoever. I have no desire or intention to ever move to or live in the United States. You couldn't pay me enough to leave Canada. We're going to talk about why that is today. Now, I could make this really coy or really cute and give you a quick answer and make it a 10-second video. Give you a one-word answer. Trump. But the truth is, it's much more complicated than that. There are big differences between Canada and the United States. And despite some recent talk about will Canada ever be the 51st state of the Union, no, Canada is a very different, distinct country. For one thing, you can start off, we're a lot nicer and more polite. Traditionally, we're known for that, okay? We've got maple syrup, butter tarts, and poutine. Ice hockey is a far more interesting sport than American football. And let's face it, Tim Hortons is way better than Starbucks. But in this video, we're going to talk about some bigger things than that. We're going to talk about the countries, the economies, the cultures, the lifestyles, military readiness, gun controls, different aspects of life in Canada versus life in the United States, and why I and many others are far better suited to living in Canada. A very recent survey, literally this week, found that 13% of Canadians are willing to join the United States. They think Canada should become part of the United States. That concerns me. But on the other hand, 87% wanted nothing to do with it. And that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. One of the biggest differences between Canada and the United States, lifestyle-wise, is the state of our healthcare systems, health insurance. In Canada, we have universal health care. In the United States, they're fighting against it and always have been, and it's not even close to happening. Now, I made a full different video about that recently, and you can, if you have an interest, you can just have a look at that. But in Canada, we believe that, nobody should go bankrupt having to pay for medical treatment. Nobody should have to mortgage their house. Nobody should be denied medical treatment because they have no insurance or no money or they're poor. Whether you're working poor, unemployed, retired, middle class, millionaire, billionaire, generally speaking, you have the same entitlement to health care throughout the country. That's something that almost every country in the world has, but not the United States. So right there, no thank you. Then we look at other big differences. Gun culture. There's an incredible amount of gun violence in the United States. School shootings, mass shootings. They happen all the time. They do happen in other countries, but not nearly as often. In an attempt to get that under control, gun control are sometimes suggested. And in Canada, we have gun registration and gun controls that most Americans would consider really restrictive. Now, I know all kinds of friends of mine who are hunters and gun collectors and target shooters. And they bitch about controls and regulations, but they all have guns. They all get their activities done. None of them are being denied. The police are not going around locking up guns and, disarming citizens. There's this myth in the USA that if you get gun control, somehow you'll have a passive population. It just doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't happen. Another example, crime. Crime, law enforcement, and justice. There is far more violence in American cities and urban centers than there is in Canada. We got some areas and we've got some problems, but there's really not a comparison between the two. Our cities are generally safer to walk in, safer to live in, and people know that and they value that. Law enforcement, police in the U.S. are downright nasty a lot of times. They can be deceptive. They can be tough. We have had police abuse cases up here. But compared to the things that go on in the U.S., once again, no thank you. And justice as part of crime. We still, the Americans have a Bill of Rights and a Constitution and a number of laws protecting them, but the abuses of the American justice system are widespread. That doesn't happen in Canada. Generally speaking, our people are protected against abuses from the police and the authorities and the justice system. There's also quite a difference in our tolerance of different lifestyles, our diversity, and our race relations. We have a completely different view of that than Americans do. When immigrants came into the U.S., they basically, philosophically, thought of it as a melting pot. They were going to take everybody, melt them together, make them into one, make them the same. Canada took a different approach. We have a term that we call multiculturalism. And Canada is a diverse country, ethnically. We have people from all parts of the world, a lot of people from all parts of the world. They're Canadians, far more mixed and integrated into our society than they are in the U.S. It has surprised me over the years when I've traveled into the U.S., especially to the southern parts, where people who I knew, good friends of mine, I'd hear them say things and I just shake my head. The use of the N-word, attitudes towards people of other religions and ethnicities. I couldn't believe what they were saying. And these were normal, or apparently normal, everyday people. But the depth of subtle racism is very real in the United States. And in Canada, whether it's ethnicity or whether it's sexual orientation, we've got people who are biased and who are bigoted, but our laws try to protect people and our society tries to give them respect in a way that I don't see in the United States and never have seen. Then we come to environmental policy. Canada cares about the environment. We're a nation of natural resources. We have water and we have minerals and we have forests. But at the same time, we're not into destroying the environment. We sign on to most treaties. We take measures to protect the environment for our future generations. Far more so than we're far more willing to sacrifice our short-term needs to our long-term environmental benefits than the United States is. And that's a huge difference. Now, then you come to, economic inequality and wealth redistribution. Canada has a social safety net that protects people in ways that's unheard of in the U.S. They would call it socialist, communist, Marxist. How can you even think that way? But we believe in fair wealth redistribution. Our tax system reflects that. Our benefit programs reflect that. And most Canadians are content with it. And you can see that in our education system. Universities and colleges are heavily subsidized by the government and by taxpayers. University degrees are within the reach of almost everybody. There are struggles and there are student loans that build up, but nothing compared to the dollar amounts that are involved in the United States. Our public schools at grade schools and high schools are all or predominantly public and publicly funded. We do have some private schools. It is out there. But, private schools, religious schools, homeschooling are very unusual to find. There are cases of it and it's allowed, but it's not a preference. It's not widespread. There's also a big difference in militarization between the two countries. The United States has tended to be, or thought of themselves as the police of the world. and they've involved themselves in conflicts throughout the globe to protect freedom and to protect democracy. And yeah, there's been a lot of good to that. In Canada, we're not isolationists, but we've tended to be peacekeepers. And we have a much smaller military per capita than the U.S. does and spend far less than the military. We've thought of ourselves, as I said, as peacekeepers. Nobody in Canada ever has to be concerned about the military draft. It hasn't happened in generations, and it ain't going to happen again. In the U.S., it did happen 50, 60 years ago, and there's talk all the time of reinstating a draft. Canada works for world peace. The U.S. works to protect their interests, and often the military-industrial complex is used to advance the needs and demands of corporate America. And the multinationals, as well as the citizens, or in addition to the citizens, or at the cost of the citizens. So, there's a big difference there. Political polarization and the politics of hate. America is divided these days to the point that it could be on the brink of a civil war. Now, that's not just recent. This has been going on for a long time. If you have a political opinion that's different than what someone else has, you learn and you're taught to hate that person and to hate everything about them. They are bad and they are evil. In Canada, we have some of that creeping in. Unfortunately, there are more than a few who are trying to mimic the U.S. But generally speaking, there's a level of respect. Our politicians couldn't get away with half the things they do in the U.S. without being run out of office, just on moral grounds. It wouldn't happen. Americans are widely perceived as extremely arrogant, and they have an unearned sense of exceptionalism that defies all logic and is totally unearned. These claims of home of the free and land of the brave, claiming that it's the only place in the world that has freedom or democracy or justice, it's absolutely insane. Country's right through thick or thin, no matter what. It manifests itself in a form of jingoistic nationalism that's unheard of and ridiculous. Rah, 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 America first. America's better at this, America's better at that. And that's led to a sense of global awareness, a total lack of global awareness. Americans don't know where Europe is, a lot of them. Americans think that Canadians live in igloos. And I know there are a lot of well-educated, knowledgeable, well-traveled Americans, but vast segments of the population are truly unaware of what the world is like, what the politics of the world is like, and what the people of the world are like. And so much of that is influenced, fostered, and reinforced by America's cultural dominance. Some even call it cultural imperialism. Hollywood, Disneyland, Texas, New York City, these all are dreams to people who see it portrayed in movies and television. Heroes, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen, always stepping up to be the good guys. Americans are always the heroes. Larger than life. We have a national pride in Canada, but it's more subtle. We take things differently. We know we're a good country, and we're proud of our country, but we don't do it at the exclusion of other countries. I believe, and Canada believes, that it's possible to have more than one good guy. It's not a matter of we win and you lose. We're good and you're bad. We're great and you're pathetic. That seems to be a predominant attitude and state of mind throughout America, and really how almost the whole world perceives and views Americans. I don't think it's really appropriate to compare countries or nationalities. I don't think you can. To a large degree, what nationality you are is based upon some imaginary line called a border where your parents happen to be in the day of your birth. It's not as much a matter of your birthplace as it is your upbringing, the values and the principles upon which you were raised, and that your culture, government, and education system imbued you with and embraced you with. I have no desire to tell anybody in the world how to act, how to vote, what they should do or shouldn't do. My view on politics is a lot like my view on religion. You're entitled to have your own views. I have mine and I'm proud of it. And yes, I'm willing to talk and you can try to convince me, but don't try to tell me that you're right and I'm wrong, that you're good and I'm evil, because that's just not the case. The reality of it is, I'm proud to be a Canadian. For all of our problems, and we have many of them, and discontent is widespread, as it is in most places in the world in the human condition. We, the North, are here and proud and distinct, and we're going to make a go of it, and we're going to make our country better our way. So I want to thank you for watching today, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of my content, I've been at this now for about 4 months. I've got about 10,000 subscribers and well over 7 videos published. So please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and it's really important, please leave comments. I need to know what you think, what you agree with or disagree with. It helped me quite a bit. So once again, thanks a lot and have yourself a great week.